This podcast is brought to you by Audio-Technica, celebrating over 50 years of audio excellence. Well known throughout the recording industry for their acclaimed 40 and 50 series studio microphones and professional M series headphones, Audio-Technica is proud to be the first choice of countless award-winning producers, engineers, and musicians. Learn more at audiotechnica.com.
Hey, it's Larry Crane. Welcome to the Tape Op Podcast. Okay, are you ready? What's the common thread between John Lennon, Cheap Trick, Slash, Aerosmith, Miles Davis, Patti Smith, Oyster Cult, the Yardbirds, New York Dolls, Clutch, and Local H? It's Jack Douglas. Tape Op interviewed Jack along with Jay Messina back in Tape Op number 90, but my pal Luther and I were able to catch up with Jack in Los Angeles in early 2018 to talk shop and dig into his history. Enjoy!
This audio recording was not originally tracked with the intent of using for a podcast. It was recorded solely for transcription for our print interview. Please forgive any balance issues, background sounds, or lack of clarity. Enjoy.
Are we doing?
We're going.
Okay.
I feel like a lot of your productions feel kind of timeless. You know, for good rock and roll recordings, you could put one on and be like, what year is this? And like,
Well, that's the thing.
Together.
I tried not to ever process to get that whatever process was in vogue.
Right.
I never really knew how to do it. Okay, gated reverb. Nah, I never get it right. You know, so basically, what I did was I trained as a guy, as a staff engineer. Your job was to capture what the instrument sounded like out on the floor.
Right.
In fact, Royce Calla would drag you out into the room, put your ear to whatever instrument was, and say to you, find the sweet spot. That's where the mic goes. Listen to it. Listen to it. You know, and it didn't matter to him if it was a harp or a piccolo, or he's go out and now reproduce that sound in the control room. Figure out what mic is going to work best for it, what pre, and don't process.
Right.
But you were given the time to do it.
No, right? Not that much time.
But I mean,
not really, no. And then to further train you, you would go do a session or a number of sessions with Jay Messina, and so Jay Messina was the jingle guy. And so they would come in with a 40-piece orchestra, and in 3 hours they would leave with the orchestra, the announce, the backing vocals, the rhythm section, and a mix.
Yeah.
And they
a lot
would
of union stuff, right? So
yeah, and they would have a 30-second spot and a 60-second spot, done in 3 hours. Jeez. So the idea was you had to, if you worked with Jay, you learned that, he put the mics in the right place and he put the fader up, and there was the sound. And he learned from Phil Ramone.
Right.
So it was that school, and so.
So it's kind of passed down.
Yeah, and that's what I went with.
Yeah.
And so I never really I never liked the other stuff that much.
The trendy stuff.
The trendy stuff, yeah.
How did you survive the 80s?
I didn't. I retired the 80s.
Right.
I took a vacation and did
Right.
drugs for like 10 years.
You did the right thing.
Yeah, I did. No, I did a few things. I did. I did a few records, but not very many.
Yeah.
I preferred to bury my head in,
Here's a question: when you did the very few things you did in the 80s, or when you heard stuff in the 80s, did you kind of instinctually know it didn't sound good?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't like
gated
it.
stuff and all the.
Yeah, no, I didn't like it, and I knew. As far as I was concerned, I wasn't going to work. So, I figured I'd, really earned a vacation. Like by 80, after John's death, I was kind of fucked up. So, after he died, it was like, I started to bury myself in Valium to get to sleep. But it led to other stuff, and I really didn't give a shit for a while.
Yeah.
And so, by the mid '80s, I just stopped working.
Yeah.
And went down to Florida and lived in a nice house on the New River and watched the riverboat go by, stoned.
Yeah, sure.
And then I decided to give up drugs completely, and I'm still sober.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Supertramp called.
Oh, yeah.
And asked if I'd like to do a record, and I said, "Geez, I might as well go back and do a record."
Where did you go?
I came out here and recorded the tracks at Ocean Way.
Oh,
Nice.
And then to Rick's place in Encino, and then we mixed it in New York at Manhattan Center.
What album was that?
I can't remember
It's
this.
like after Breakfast in America.
Oh, yeah.
way after.
Way after.
Is this like
the
late
90s,
80s? Oh,
90s.
early 90s.
Yeah.
Early 90s, yeah.
Yeah.
Then I did Clutch
Oh,
right
wow.
after that,
Yeah.
and then Slash called and said, when we wanted to work with you, we weren't allowed to because we heard bad things about you, and like they said, the combination of you and us would have just been a disaster.
I'm sure. Did you say, I'm sure I heard bad things about you.
Yeah, no, but I understood completely. I really did. So I said, yeah, but the time's right now. It's all good.
Yeah.
So a Clutch record, and then back to
Are you
work
talking about with
Aerosmith.
Slash when you started doing the Snake
Snake
Pit
Pit?
stuff in like
Yeah.
the mid '90s or late '90s?
Late 90s, yeah.
That's when I was with you at Interscope. You were working on. I feel like it was like '99, first or
Yeah.
second Snake Pit record.
Yeah.
Snake Pit record.
Right.
And I remember we were waiting to hear something about something. This was the Federale thing.
Yeah.
And you had the headphones, and you put them on Mark Ford.
Yeah.
And he went, "Wow, this is." And then you put them on me, and you said something like, "Well, they're kind of, they kind of want to get back to like a Toys in the Attic kind of thing."
Yeah.
Anyway, what struck me was, speaking of the timeless
Right,
thing,
right.
was how good it sounded. It sounded so good that.
Thank you.
I said, and it was just kind of. It made me so excited at the moment, and all of a sudden it put some kind of bearing on the moment. Like, wow, I really hope this works out now because I can't believe how good this sounds. But it
Yeah.
was just the Snake. Like, I don't know, it was just you just say, hey, check it out. This is what I'm working on. But it
Yeah.
sounded live, phenomenal.
That was
You seemed
live.
really excited about it.
Yeah,
at the
we
time.
cut the band live, and this is why this new studio that my partner and I are building out by the airport is built for recording musicians live. But it's a big room, so it'll be good for string dates, for horn dates, for orchestra
Wow.
dates.
Where is it? Is it still downtown? Or is...
No, we're moving from downtown to out by the airport.
Oh wow!
In we found a big space, and that's where we have the Series E. It's Aaron Smart and myself. It's our equipment. We just got a Fairchild. We just got a half-inch ATR that we bought from Sterling, so it's beautifully
nice.
modified.
You'll have the Studer in there.
My Studer and his
Yeah.
Studer. So that's a 24 and a 16.
16.
Beautiful.
And so we have just about every kind of mic pre that was ever invented, including really the black Neves,
Oh, yeah.
the real early stuff.
Like germaniums? ones?
Yes.
Right?
We have now 20 of those.
Can I ask you?
I mean, what would you say to someone that was just determined to get into this business in
Good
the same
luck.
way as you
Get
at this point in time?
Yeah, good luck. I'm all for you, but it's a tough route.
You always have to have a love, otherwise.
That's
I mean,
it, you
Even
have
then,
to.
like you were talking about miking the sound here, that you have to be kind of excited about
I
it.
am.
Like,
I'm.
Yeah.
I tell my students when they ask me, so how do, you got professional ears. How do we train our ears? We don't get into the studio. I said, out there, listen to the
Roll
wind, the
tape.
traffic, anything. Listen to it. you'll identify the frequency response of a subway. I don't care.
I find it's interesting too that you're a full-on engineer who can do all that, but like you've done tons of stuff with Jay Messina over the years. And
Oh, yeah.
So when you get like sort of the call for the producer's chair, do you find it's a better day for you to have someone that's an engineer co-conspiring with you?
I really like having an engineer that I can talk to in engineering terms. So I'm not talking of colors or anything. I mean, I can talk specifically about what I'm looking for in frequency response and tonality, and so I like having an engineer I can talk to.
Did someone work for you on the double fantasy stuff? Was someone being a co-conspirator as far as actual
one
engineering?
of my favorites. That's a long, involved story, but it was Lee DiCarlo, who is now retired, and Lee.
Was he the house?
Well, he was the house engineer at Record Plant, L.A.
Oh, at L.A. right?
Yeah, he was the chief engineer, L.A.
Wow.
But he's a New York guy, a very interesting character. His father. Anybody see Jersey Boys, the movie?
No,
That's in that.
I want to
Okay.
see that, but
Yeah, his father was the gangster that gypped DiCarlo. His father was a famous mafia gangster, ran the waterfront in Hoboken.
very colorful, I'm sure.
Yes, and Lee, he wanted Lee to go into the family business, and
Sanitation.
Lee was more. He was a musician, so the docks.
The doc, sure.
So Lee joined the Marines and went off to Vietnam and parachuted in and did terrible things to people. And,
Sure.
And he was what they call advance. They would drop in before a main assault and just create chaos, and then leave. And then during the chaos, then a main force would go in. So that was this guy, and he came out, and then his father got him a job with Morris Levy at Roulette Records, and he wrote some songs for him, and he engineered, and he worked his way up. Pretty interesting character.
Kind of ironic that he would have worked for Morris Levy, but then ended up with Lennon.
Yeah.
Oh, you're getting to that. I think.
Yeah. So the thing was, now this Double Fantasy album, John and I had been close since Imagine.
Yeah.
So this Double Fantasy album, John wasn't sure it was even going to come off. It was a secret. So we couldn't do it at Record Plant because there was always somebody out there in front of Record Plant checking to see what stars were going.
Yeah.
It was the place.
Especially then.
Yeah. So we couldn't do it there. So the place that was off the beat track was Hit Factory, the original, which was on 48th Street, down near 10th Avenue. Nobody was around there. There was nobody. So so we went down there to do it, but I couldn't bring any staff guys from Record Plant to do it, or I'd have done it with Jay.
Just to keep the.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Right.
So that's why you flew him out.
My second choice, of course, was Lee. Now, John was fascinated by Lee for numbers of reasons, because he was an interesting, colorful character.
Yeah.
Dark shades, blonde hair down here, looked like a surfer, big beard, just a wacky, crazy guy. And as soon as John found out that Lee had been in Vietnam and, in fact, was pretty much an assassin over there, he wanted to know everything about it.
Everything. Yeah.
He was intrigued by this guy. And Lee, of course, didn't like to talk about it, except to say that he one time landed on a punji stick when he parachuted down, went to walk, and he couldn't because the stick was to his foot.
Oh,
And
thank God it was just his foot.
Yeah, and they sent him home. And that was the end of his career over there. But that was the only thing he said. I got out eventually. And so he wouldn't talk about it. Wouldn't talk about it. John drove him crazy. He wouldn't talk about it. Come on, Lee. Come on, tell us about it. There's nothing to talk about. Let's make the fucking record, all right?
Wow.
So one day, Lee came in the very same gear that he would parachute in, He came in dressed as a bush.
No way.
Yeah, he was in a bush. A bush sat down in the chair at the board next to us. I didn't say anything.
Just fucking with,
Yeah,
fucking with John.
yeah. And John just looked at him. And he looked at me and he says, "I think I get the point."
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't want to talk about it. But he didn't want to know. We don't want him to know he's here. He did the whole session in a bush that day. He was a character. And
Wow. Good engineer.
oh,
Well,
fantastic.
Well, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
because, but the record. It's interesting that he's from L.A. because I do.
No,
get-
he's from New York.
He's from New York, but meaning he was doing his work in L.A. And it's interesting because the record does have this. It's not as street as New. You know what I mean? It has
Yeah.
this kind of L.A. sound to it. I wonder if that's down to
Yeah, that's
kind of
just
the sound that was going at the time in L.A., which is a little kind of like fat and.
Yeah, it is
slick
very
and-
fat. It
I
is
mean,
very fat.
obviously-
But that room was fat.
Right.
Andy Newmark, I used to go out and bug him all the time to play harder all the time.
Interesting.
And Andy's a great drummer, but I needed that heavy groove on everything.
Sure.
You know, I need him to lay into it.
Yeah.
And so what I would do is before he would get there, I would go out and get 2 pencils and lay it on the snare drum, and then I'd walk him out into the room and go, "No wonder."
Oh.
See, that's the problem. You got to use sticks. The pencils won't work.
What made you choose Andy?
It was all about Roxy
Roxy,
music for me.
yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been Steve Gadd.
That would make sense.
Yeah, it was gonna, but Steve was
Considering
off
Levin
with somebody else. But
Tony Levin was on the line.
Tony Levin,
Yeah.
he's the player on
Yeah,
it.
he is like.
But Tony was
what was the
absolutely my
choice?
favorite.
How would you come across him before that?
Well, I knew them all for years.
Okay,
I mean,
good.
these were regular studio guys.
Right.
Only Andy wasn't
Right.
a regular studio guy, but I went after Andy because I just loved all those grooves. I just thought,
Yeah.
He kind of killed that record, actually. He kind of murdered it. He really did a great job.
Yeah,
on it.
it's
It's kind
fantastic.
of perfect, really.
the
what
only
he
thing
did.
that's not Andy is the drum fill in Starting Over. Bop bop do da bop do bop do.
Who's that?
Yeah.
Is that a snip snip?
Yeah, it's a snip
Oh,
snip.
that's so
It was never a break there. There was never a break there, but I just thought,
What were those Cheap Trick sessions like that on that? Because you had some of the guys coming.
I
and playing, right?
you know, I thought
That's interesting.
that those guys, because they were so Lennon
Perfect on
yeah,
paper.
Yeah, they loved Lennon. They loved Beatles, but Lennon in
Yeah,
particular. So
Certainly.
I thought that's going to work great as his little rock combo.
Yeah.
So that a little less of the studio guys, a little bit more.
It's
of a-
intriguing to listen to.
And so they played the 2 songs,
Yeah.
and John just had a blast playing with them.
That'd be fun.
It was, yeah, I mean, just to watch that happen, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, Rick Nielsen came up with part of that, and then
Yeah.
John answered it.
and you ended up using that lick in a way.
Well, I used the lick,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Yoko came in, and she every once in a while would have a really good point.
Yeah.
I mean, a really good point. And the point was this: it's going to feel too. I loved it, she said, but it's going to feel out of place on an album that's supposed to just flow.
Oh, interesting. So it wasn't really about like. It was
No.
just more about hoping that could fit in, and it just wouldn't fit in.
It just didn't fit in.
So
It was too hard.
As opposed to a whole album of that.
Yeah.
But he probably would have gotten to that, I would imagine.
Yeah, maybe.
You know, because he was a rocker.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Boy, he just to watch him play with those guys.
Yeah.
What a treat.
And so it came out anyway.
Yeah.
Eventually.
You
and
told me about it way before it came out.
Yeah.
When you told us, you kind of blew our minds at the tables, and me and Mark Ford said,
Yeah.
he did some stuff with Cheap Trick. Like, get out of here.
Oh, yeah.
But then a few years later, it came out on the box set, and it was...
And then Jay and I 4 years ago did
Right.
the stripped version
Right,
of it,
right.
which was really
So they did Losing You, and what was the other one they did?
Moving On. I
Moving
think,
On.
Yeah.
for Yoko.
For Yoko.
Yeah.
So there's a track of Yoko with them.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense if you really know her stuff.
Yeah.
She did.
And it's cool. And I just a couple of years ago I did a track with Yoko. I did a couple of tracks
Yeah.
with Yoko.
So you guys still
Yeah, we
keep
still
in
work
touch and
together.
work together.
Yeah.
Well, the version they did. Have you ever heard the version of Double Fantasy where he and Jay went back and just kind of stripped them down?
I've heard. I feel like I heard. It
It's
sound
really
is
interesting.
acoustic. There's some acoustic
It's
stuff.
just
Yeah.
less overdubs and mostly
It's
less
mostly
overdubs
Mostly it's the raw tracks and the
Yeah.
live vocals.
Yeah.
No, barely an overdub. And then there's the
Cool to hear it differently.
there's the strange track we did of Every Man Has a Woman, which was originally done as like a conceptual synth piece.
Oh, wow.
Also, there's a lot of his patter. And the beginning of the album, and the beginning of the original album starts with the bell. Bing, bing,
Yeah.
bing. The beginning of this album starts with the actual words that were said. A dedication to Buddy Holly
Wow.
and Gene Vincent. He dedicates the album
Right.
to his heroes
Yeah.
and Elvis.
Plus the 50s vibe of starting over.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
He says this is for, and then he says all this, and that's how that album starts. I also, I mixed that at Power Station, Avatar at the time, and Yoko would come by about every 3 or 4 days to hear the progress of it, and it's very dry. We made the record really dry.
I like that
sounding.
about it.
So you hear this great rhythm section, like you're in the room with them.
It's tight, yeah.
And I have a piece of equipment that was a prototype made by Ramza, called a Ramza Phantom Speaker Synthesizer. Now this was made.
I've never seen this.
No, because there's only one.
Yeah.
There's only one.
Wow.
So they made this thing, and it works on infinite phase. It's a box with a big one controller and a big box of brains I've never looked in. I don't want to.
Yeah.
And there's 8 360-degree pan pots.
Oh.
Okay. Now you come out of this thing and go into 2 tracks on the board. Whatever you put into it, you can get on this joystick, and you can start moving it around your head in stereo.
That's insane.
Because it's working off a phase.
Right.
So, but it's fine. It's so finely tuned.
Yeah.
I can pull it back and it'll go right over your head. Now you have to sit in the middle of the 2 speakers.
Right.
But it works great. Now when they made this thing, they gave one to me to try with Aerosmith. So I would try different things, and this was at Record Plant. And after I would try something in the mix process of where I could locate these things, I would run, because of dealing with phase, I would run with the tape into the cutting room where they had a lathe to see if the lathe would cut it because of the phase.
Right. It's gonna
Yeah.
kick the needle out of the.
And
groove.
sure enough, pretty much anything that had any weight on it at all, even a vocal, it would kick up.
Oh, boy.
It would kick up. I could put some reverb back there.
Did you let them know?
I could put a little percussion back there if it was bright and had no bottom in
Yeah.
it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I did on a couple
Right.
of Aerosmith albums. I messed around with it. And a couple of people wrote me letters that were smoking a little bit. I happened to notice, is there somebody behind my couch?
Oh, my God.
And I never talked about
That's
it, but
kind
I
of an
did.
interesting concept.
So
though.
then I went to Medem. You know Medem,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I went over to Medem, and Philips was showing us this thing that was going to revolutionize everything called the CD. Wasn't available yet. And I asked the guy at Philips, I said, let me ask you something. I still had the Ramza.
Yeah.
I said, let me ask you something. If I put something out of phase, he says, oh, it makes no difference.
Right.
You always just a laser. It doesn't know phase.
Okay.
So you think this is going to be big? Oh, we'll take over. No more vinyl. No more cutting. All CDs. Great. So now I went back. I took $6,000-$7,000 out of my bank account and I put it over here and I wrote Ramza. I'm going to buy the goddamn thing. Now I've had it like maybe 3 years. It's just sitting around.
That's a trip.
So I call up Panasonic, Ramza Professional Division. I said, remember this Jack Douglas, remember that thing you guys, you gave me that Ramza Phantom Speaker Synthesizer prototype? Yeah. Well, I'd like to buy it. And I said, that old thing, just keep it. So I still have it. So to get back to my story. So I took in one song on the stripped down Double Fantasy. At the end of the song, John starts talking, and I put him here next to you.
Oh, weird. Yeah, by your ear.
Yeah,
Wow.
so he's right here next to you. So Yoko's sitting in between the two speakers. She's listening to the song. She's got her eyes closed. Song ends. She's still into it. And John starts talking to her from over here. And at that moment, I wished I hadn't done it because I saw her.
It was just too real.
She turned white because it was dry and very real sounding and right here. And I saw her turn white and I saw her start to cry. And she said, "He's in the room with us." And I said, "Yoko, I'm really sorry. I should have told you that I did something to make him sound like he was in the room. And I really apologize for upsetting you like that." And she said, "No." She said, "Don't change it. It's absolutely beautiful." And I hope that everyone that hears it has that same experience as I just had, where he's talking.
And this, of
next
course,
to you.
was happening live with the monitors. In other words, you don't have to be in the cans for
No,
this effect to happen.
you have to be sitting between the two monitors.
That's amazing.
And there he was.
And
He's right here talking to you. Yeah, he's got out of the speakers altogether. Not even related.
It's amazing.
Because it's the only time I used it in the whole album. So everything is here. It's here.
her
It's here.
contribution to that album, and not just in the writing and performing, but her producing, is really underrated, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, in other words, she had some pretty.
She
kind of brought it on that record too. I think her songs are great.
Yeah,
on it.
that's. But I mean, I think she's done some pretty kind of cool work after. And of course, the last thing we did was with her. That was Walking on Thin Ice.
Walking on Thin Ice.
Yeah, and that was really quite an experience because John said, "I'm going to Bermuda. I won't see you until after the New Year." Right. And he said, "We've done enough work. It's great. The thing's coming up the charts. It's all good." I think Starting Over was already #1. And he said he was leaving, so I booked another thing for RCA. And he calls me up. He says, "You know what? I can't stop. Let's go back. Let's start doing stuff again." So
Well, the tap was.
yeah, he was ready to go. So I said, "I already booked something." He said, "Well, just move it to late at night." Oh, great. Okay. So I had to book my RCA session. I was at Record Plant, but now we could go back to Record Plant because
Cat's out of the bag.
it was fine.
Right.
So he didn't want anybody else in the room except he and I, Yoko, and one assistant. He wanted me to engineer and produce, and in fact, to play. He wanted me to play on it too. So we made a loop of a track that we had, but didn't do anything else on.
Like a drum.
Yeah, a drum loop, and then he and I played the rest of the stuff over it.
Wow.
And
For Thin Ice.
yeah,
Yeah.
and Steve, Steve Marcantonio? He's a big engineer at Blackbird.
Yeah, I know that name.
He's a New York guy that went down
Blackbird
to
in
Nashville.
Nashville?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the assistant on it.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
that was it. We were just in the, and we did it in the mix room, which just had a booth. That's all we needed.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was a 24-track tape loop.
Yeah.
It was really fun.
Did you feel like a world of possibilities was opening up at the time because they were just getting so excited about making music?
Oh, I knew
together?
what was
You
going
knew.
on. Yeah.
Because it's kind of, you listen back. I mean, you're talking about like the Milk and Honey stuff. It's
Yeah, I
pretty
mean that was all
exciting.
done
It's-
at the same time.
It's fun. It's kind of new wavy and it's kind of different and it seems
Well,
kind
there
of
was
forward.
a lot of stuff on the drawing board. There was a tour. There was
Right.
there was a
I heard that.
There was a Ringo album that Paul and John had already committed to. They were just waiting for George. That would have been the rhythm section
Oh wow.
behind Ringo,
Yeah.
and that's what Ringo and I were.
Yeah.
Who I call Richard, by the way,
Yeah.
not Ringo.
So
But
they were all kind of just getting back into the swing of of working with each
yeah.
other.
I mean, it was. I had a Sony Blaster. It was a good one. It had a really good sound, and I used to put it on the board to mix to listen to, in my final mixes. Now I use a Bose Wave radio is what I listen to for my final mixes. But then I used this Sony, and when we weren't doing anything, John liked to listen to the radio because he was a music nut. He loved music all the time. And whenever a Beatles song came on, that would stop the session. And,
Sure.
And he would describe everything that happened that day.
Still proud of it.
Yeah, and talk about everything that was wrong, everything that was right with it, everything that happened in the studio, and you could have actually stopped for an hour while he talked about what was going on, and how much he loved the Beatles, which was
He was their biggest fan, right?
yeah, it was really cool. And then it was fun talking with Jeff Emmerich about the very same things.
Yeah.
Because Jeff knew a different John than I knew. And in fact, he told me he wished he knew that.
Yeah, he got the brunt of it.
Yeah.
Did at that time.
Yeah.
You know, it's too bad.
Yeah, he didn't know. Paul was different to him.
Yeah.
And of course, Ringo was always a bless.
But who's really diplomatic in their 20s? It's like
Yeah.
those guys back then.
No, but
were all
apparently
just-
John could be.
He was
bit of a-
rough on him.
Yeah, he was rough. But he was. By the time we did Double Fantasy, he was a whole
Mellow.
different person completely.
There's that quote from George Harrison. He said, like, the fans gave us their love, and we paid for it with our nervous systems. You know.
Yeah.
It's like, that was an incredibly unusual position for any rock star to ever be in.
Yeah.
To go through.
I don't think people today can really conceive of it. You could get an idea maybe if you like sort of watch the anthology or something, but there's nothing to really compare it to. It's like a tidal wave that lasted years.
8 days a week that was pretty good.
That get right. That was a
you get a
good
feel for it.
Yeah.
It was kind of,
But it's pretty. It was.
go.
Yeah.
It's not
Go, go.
natural.
One of the things I discovered from watching 8 days a week from that was there was a guy that I worked with. We worked on a record called American Pie, and his name is Ed Freeman. He produced American Pie,
Yeah.
and I was one of the engineers. on
American
it.
Pie, Don McLean.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
And Ed produced it, and we worked weeks and weeks on one song. There were so many edits. in it.
Sounds like it.
There were so many edits that I thought they named it after Ed. Oh, let's Ed it. You really? but anyway, it turns out that Ed Freeman was a great piano player, and a photographer who lived in Greenwich Village. Turns out that he was Ringo's drum roadie.
No.
Yeah,
is he the guy
on the
in the movie
American
that
tour?
talks
He's
about-
in the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
He's
that's-
in the movie.
Like when he's moving the kid around. on
He
stage.
never mentioned that.
He produced American Pie.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, you'd think it would have said producer of American Pie.
No, nothing like that. No, just roadie.
Brody.
So that would be the early days of being at
Yeah,
record? Is that Record Plant?
record
Is that-
plant. Yeah.
What was he like to work with at the time, Don McLean?
Straight up folk singer was very interesting, but we had to make this device for him because Ed Freeman, that was a great rhythm section. He was playing acoustic guitars
Track both.
and vocals, not a problem,
Yeah.
but he may want to use a different vocal and a different
Oh shoot!
acoustic.
Did you do a thing?
Yeah, we had to build
Oh,
a thing out of
oh, wow.
plexiglass so we could see his hands.
Wow, that's brilliant.
So
So,
he
it
could-
still did that, but
Yeah.
you could see through.
Yeah, but it was still around his neck.
for those at home, he could have died. Let's
Yeah,
put
he
it-
could have died, but it worked great.
That's the iron lung of
It was
guitar.
really great. Exactly.
Some kind of
His
chastity.
hand the guitar in his hand was in a box.
Do you think at the end of the day you needed that thing? In other words, would there have been still an?
Oh no, there would have been so much leakage.
So much leakage.
There's no way you can get a vocal out of a
So without getting
acoustic guitar.
sued and taking a court, like how many edits are in American Pie?
About one every.
He's
2
allowed.
feet.
It's like a 20-minute song. It's
Yeah,
okay.
About one every 2 feet.
Everyone, everything. Oh my god!
That's on the multi-track.
No.
Yes. Look, when I was a young engineer back then in that part of the world, which was rough, I had to do whatever. I had to take whatever clients they gave me. They just said, you're doing this date. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. This is your date. And I would get this date that started at midnight. And my job was, it was a COD. I had to collect the money at the end of the date. And it was a pimp who had a couple of hookers who could sing. And they had a little rhythm section. They paid the rhythm section, but in order for me to collect my money for the session, I had to wait for their other girls to come in.
Oh boy, yeah, sure.
Drop off
So
the cash.
yeah, to drop off the cash to pay for me. And they used to come in and put their guns under the console.
Yeah.
They had the hats, everything. They were
The whole
full.
deal.
Wow.
And that was like one of my, oh, thanks. You know?
Like
Yeah.
this is your initiation.
Yeah, I had to ask for the money.
It's hard enough asking for the money at the end of a session anyway.
Yeah,
Now.
well, yeah, when the guy's armed.
And the money was derived illegally.
Yeah, right. It's like you didn't want to take it.
That's amazing.
Oh my God, that's weird.
It was, but it, that was, and actually they were cool guys, and the music was good.
Yeah.
It was really funky.
Funky music.
Yeah, and the girls could sing great, and it was slightly flat, and it was just cool.
Yeah.
You started as a janitor, right?
Yes, I did.
How did you work up from janitor to engineering?
You got to beg, guys, can I sit in? Can I this? Can I, anything to get into a
So you were a
session.
guitar player by.
I was
Right.
I was
Yeah.
signed to labels. I was in bands. The reason I got there was because I'd mixed a record that the Isley Brothers were producing me,
Right.
and
Wow.
and I didn't like their mixes, and I ended up at A&R at Phil Ramone's studio remixing it.
Were you the
And,
singer as well on the track?
Background singer, but
Oh,
I
interesting.
was the bass player in that band.
Oh, okay.
But I'd been on Columbia. That was on there. I was on the Isley Brothers label,
Gotcha.
but I was on Columbia, on Bell, on Epic.
Oh wow.
I was a signed artist for years
Yeah, yeah.
and toured. For,
Under the name Jack Douglas?
no, under different band
Damn
names.
band names,
Yeah.
wow.
So because of you just kind of going to the studio working on your own stuff, you sort of got.
I just that was it. That was the first first thing I'd ever mixed.
Or you felt-
it just was
felt
not.
it.
It wasn't rock enough for me. It was too R&B-ish. But the thing was that I fell in love with that, and asked the guys at A&R if they could hire me on. I was tired of touring, and
Interesting.
and they said no, that they didn't have any openings, but they sent me to a record plant, which had just opened, and guys were leaving A&R and going over there.
Oh wow.
But Roy Sakala left, Shelly Ackes left,
Right.
Jay Messina was leaving, and even Jimmy Iovine was leaving, who was, Jimmy became my assistant when I was engineering.
Yeah.
It was the worst tape operator ever, because because Jimmy used to sit and listen to the songs so he could pick the singles. He used to be able to tell a producer, I think this is your single.
Wow. It's,
Would they just go? Would they just go? Shut up.
Yeah, but he'd be right.
But they'd realize later he was right.
Yeah.
See, that's a scary kind of talent.
Yeah, no, he'd do the
bizarre,
singles.
yeah.
He assisted me on the first New York Dolls album, and we had so much
Oh,
fun.
wow.
Yeah, that was a blast.
Were they fun to work with?
The
Absolutely.
record's so good.
The first one.
The first one.
Yeah, it was funny because Todd hated it.
Really?
Yeah, he absolutely hated them. Hated them.
Wait, he
So he
assisted
did-
you, and Todd was the producer.
Yeah, Todd
Okay,
was the
yeah,
producer.
yeah.
I was the engineer. And
He didn't
Todd
like the
hated
Dolls.
No, he never showed up. Showed up once or twice. And that was it.
So it was kind of there for name value.
Mercury Records thought it was a good combo because Todd was hot, but it wasn't. It was so they left us to our own devices, which for me led to the management knew it was going. The label didn't know there was no producer there.
Right.
If they did, they would have flipped out. We had to we always had to, cover somehow whenever the label was coming by. Yeah, he'll be back. It was,
He's getting sandwiched.
yeah, but he would show up maybe once a week,
Yeah.
and he showed up for the mixes, and that's when we would let the label in. But the management knew,
Yeah.
and so that was Lieber Krebs. That was their big act, was the Dolls, but their baby act was Aerosmith.
Right.
And so that was my reward for keeping that
Well, this is a
all
good
sing
question.
together.
So,
That's
I mean,
amazing.
would there be something that people would be pretty surprised to learn about? Because I think Thunder is pretty underrated, and like his tone was pretty, and you had to have gotten something out of that for the Aerosmith stuff. And I mean, he was pretty
You know,
heavy. I was just wondering if there's anything people
The
would be
thing was
surprised
that,
to learn.
Joe Perry was totally influenced by David.
That's what I would.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
by-
by
yeah,
Thunders.
by
So I was
Thunders,
wondering
yeah.
if there was anything. Just in, I mean, was it helpful to have someone like Thunders? Did he seem to really know what he wanted?
No,
Back then, no. So
he
that's
just
interesting.
it was just he just played.
He just plugged and played, and
Yeah.
you kind of captured it the best you could.
yeah.
How'd you capture it just in a kind of pretty standard way?
Well, the
or-
thing was that album was recorded live, so his tone is in the drums
plus the bleed, yeah,
yeah,
sure.
so it's leaking all over. What I've used a C38,
Okay,
a 57, and a Sennheiser for
on the stack.
yeah, the three of them together get the phase finally right, and that's
Because that's a big sound to really to wrangle.
Yeah,
That's,
yeah.
you know.
yeah. I mean, there was no telling him turn down a little.
Right. So right,
No.
and pretty much his sound's all in his playing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's it right
Yeah.
there. Right. I mean, you're just capturing at
Yeah.
that point.
You could talk to Syl about that.
Yeah.
Syl was okay. You know, he played on a smaller amp, and
Oh, this is okay. So that's kind of the
Syl
difference.
Syl played piano. And,
Good.
it was fun doing that comeback album with
Right.
them.
Oh, you did that. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a trip.
it was, and it's a good album.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
and I mean, David Johansen and I stayed friends forever, still good friends. But
Oh,
he is a
great.
brilliant man.
Yeah. He sure is.
He's a literary genius.
Yeah.
and a fantastic lyricist because of that.
He's always had something that almost you could say, like, in a way Tom Waits has had something or something. He's
Yeah,
had that kind of
yeah.
his own world.
Yeah, it's a funny story why David's even in that band.
Really?
Yeah, because he lived in the same building as Syl and Johnny, and they were putting a band together, and they ran out of coffee, and they went next door to their neighbor, who was David Johansen, who was an actor.
Oh, that makes sense.
And they
Were they
said,
like, you look like Mick.
that's
You're in the
exactly
band."
what
Yeah,
happened.
exactly.
You want to be in a band? You look like Mick. And he said,
You got
sure.
the lips. Get in there.
Yeah, he said, sure.
Oh my God, that's too funny.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well, it worked.
yeah, yeah.
Have you been surprised that first album's held up so well over all the years?
I kind of not. And,
Yeah, kinda not,
Yeah, kind
yeah.
of not, because that was such a statement.
Yeah.
You know, me trying to explain to people that, came in to listen to it. But I mean,
That
Iggy
must
and
have been
Bowie
funny.
came by. They were listening to
It's
it.
the people that came by. to
Yeah,
listen to
they
it.
were listening to it. But other people were like, they can't play. But that's not important. They can play. When they're together, they make a sound that's different.
Yeah, there'd be no Sex Pistols without a band like that.
No.
Yeah, just their understanding of what made it's almost like the Cramps, that understanding of what made the 50s cool.
Yeah.
And then trying to translating it to a new
Yeah.
new era. It's so cool. It's like
Yeah.
it never stops being cool.
Yeah,
if it's
exactly.
good enough, So
Hell
that
no.
did inform the Aerosmith stuff. Then.
Oh yeah, they were.
They were very aware of that.
especially Joe Perry. It's just like when I said to Joe, we can get David to sing on your solo record. He was like, "You think so?"
Wow, so you're still like really excited about
Yeah,
still that fan.
and the thing was, now at the show, you were there. You guys were there, at the Roxy, Joe Perry's show last week.
no.
No way.
So everybody showed up. Terry Reid,
Oh my gosh.
David Johansen, Robin Zander,
Oh man.
Chris Robertson.
Yeah.
They all showed up.
Wow.
Everybody was there. I can't remember the lead singer in XS. He was there too. Everybody that sang on the album showed up.
Yeah.
And of course, it was great. But who stole the show? David Johansen. And I'll tell you why. He's not a rock and roll front man. He's an old time
Showman.
Yeah, he just
You're getting a show.
he had the audience in the palm.
Wow.
Yeah, they were. wow, we never saw anything like this.
Did you have to, when you first, just don't get off the doll, but when you first worked with the doll, did you first have to go down and kind of check them out?
I was, the reason I got the gig is because I was a downtown guy.
Yeah, so you knew
I
of
lived
them
on
and
2nd
You knew what
Street.
was going down with
Yeah,
them.
yeah.
Because there was a little scene happening with
In
them,
Max's.
Right? Yeah,
I was a regular at Max's. I knew the whole thing.
You
And
knew
the
the whole
Mercer
thing.
Arts Center. And,
Mercer, yeah.
you know, I mean, I worked with Lou and I worked with Patti. And I
Right.
knew I knew the scene.
What'd you
very
do
well.
with Lou?
I worked on that Berlin album.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So,
I remember going to a record store once, and they had a big cutout at Bleecker Bob's in L.A. And they had this cutout for years that must have come out at the time, and it was hilarious. This big cutout, Lou Reed Berlin. It said like the Sgt. Pepper of the '70s,
oh,
and all these crazy quotes on it.
They should have said the feel good record.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
Who was
like-
the kids?
hold on a minute.
Oh,
you know,
man. Well, that was Bob's Ezrin's kids.
Like Bob's kids? Oh,
Yeah,
no way.
I think he told them mom died or something.
God.
that's
Something.
how they got this.
Those
Oh
things
my
are
god!
terrifying.
So you worked with Bob Ezrin on
He was the
that.
producer.
I worked with
Yeah,
Bob on a lot of things. Bob was the guy who finally convinced me that I should be producing.
That's really cool.
When I
He's
went
really
to
not discussed a lot, and I mean that guy just did really conceptual stuff.
because he's a genius.
yeah. Did he have a very? Did you find in person working on the music? He had a really great imagination.
Yeah,
Great arranger too.
yeah. I mean, he's brilliant. I love him. We were partners.
Yeah,
And we
sure.
worked up in Canada on stuff, but for Bob, it's his way or the highway.
I can
because
imagine.
he doesn't want to break. That I'm sure with the wall, because I was there when he was doing that. In fact, I went to some Air Force base and recorded a bunch. He sent me out there to
Get some shit for him.
yeah, with some planes and helicopters.
Oh,
And
right.
that's the real deal
Oh, that's wild.
that you hear on the wall.
Like the helicopter.
Lee
sound.
DiCarlo and I went out
No way.
because they were recording the wall. They were recording the wall at
Oh, my
Producer's
God.
Workshop.
Right.
And Lee and I were doing something at Record Plant in LA. We went over to see Bob working on the Pink Floyd thing. He says, "You guys busy?"
No.
No, what he got in mind.
Oh, yeah.
Grab some mics and go out to
run
Andrews Air Force Base and
They run
out in
their
the desert.
crazy time crunch, and they
Were
were
they?
were going to get a huge record label bonus, and they got it done before Christmas season.
You're kidding me.
Yeah.
For a double album.
For double album. I mean,
Yeah.
They did that record in 9 months.
Producer's Workshop.
Yeah. They started in England. They finished up in Producer's Workshop here,
Yeah.
which is that space is back open again.
Oh, it is? And the
Yeah.
mastering lab was in the front.
Right. That's
Did Bob have a theatrical background or something?
No.
I just
not at all.
noticed all
He's
this.
a pianist.
Yeah.
Oh,
And his
okay,
father,
Okay.
Yeah.
his father was a concert violinist and a brain surgeon.
Oh yeah.
Hello?
Yeah,
And
I'm getting it now.
Yeah.
his name Jack Richardson was like
Yeah.
one of the top producers in Canada.
Guess who?
And took Bob under his
Oh,
wing. Bob was
okay.
like a teenager. I
Yeah.
think, even.
So he really learned.
Bob used to sit next to me when we were doing like $1 Billion Babies.
Yeah.
And Bob would be sitting next to me smoking a pipe. And we'd be working on something with Alice. And I turned over, finally I said, Jim, let me ask you something, Bob. And he's smoking his pipe and he's taking notes. And I said, just for the fuck of it, how old are you? And he looked at me, he said, you won't tell anybody, will you? And I said, no. He said, 21.
I mean, it's crazy.
Wow.
I said, you
so
son
you-
of a bitch.
Oh
Yeah.
my
I'm
God.
older than you. I was maybe 23.
Right.
Yeah.
Still though. So he did all his best work in his 20s.
Yeah,
I
he's
mean,
still
essentially.
working.
He's still-
I mean, meaning that
Yeah,
that
he
classic
did.
70s stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. You know? There's so many fascinating people. I mean, that's obviously why would you be doing? I'd be doing a magazine about this, you know. But it's just amazing.
Have you talked to Bob Ezrin?
Oh yeah.
Oh, you have?
We've
Okay.
interviewed him before.
Oh, okay.
I email with him every once in a while too to check in. He's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
There's so many great stories. There's so many great people like that, and a lot of these lives and careers and working at various studios all intertwined. You know.
Yeah, back then.
At the end
Yeah,
of the
both
day.
coasts.
Yeah.
The most
absolutely.
brilliant person I ever knew, and the guy who stayed in the background the most was Roy Cicala.
Right. I mean, he was
Absolutely brilliant.
Right.
I mean,
People that know that his engineering chops are just
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
And mysterious.
Really?
Yeah, absolute
What's is
mysterious.
his roots kind of back? Like, did he start in the 50s or?
He started in the 60s, early 60s as a Hammond organ repairman.
Well, that should tell you right there.
Yeah,
Those
then
guys
he
are-
became a maintenance man at A&R, and then
Oh, so
he
he was
went into the
technically-
studios. But when you listen to things like, we listen to that Games album, and you listen to Number 9 Dream or whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
God.
I mean, even
Yeah.
no matter how you listen to that thing, it's mind.
It's kind of dimensional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
even
don't know
imagine.
how it was
You
done.
know, that whole
he do
imagine. He mixed it, and he recorded most of the stuff on it when he came over.
Yeah.
And you know, I worked on it. I was his assistant on
Yeah.
it. But Phil Spector, you know, he did nothing when he got here to New York on that record.
Yeah.
He was drugged, mostly asleep. You know, every once in a while I'd lift his head and go, more echo. But when John and Roy,
That sounds like a producer to me.
yeah, when John and Roy started working together, John could see that he didn't really need Phil for the rest of it because of the way Roy worked.
Right.
But he was absolutely just.
Was there anything particularly unique about Roy that you just could pinpoint just to him out of anybody?
Yeah,
Just
there's
to-
no. I mean, if you listen to his drum sound,
That's what I was going to actually get at. Yeah.
it's like it's
Like
intentionally.
the Imagine drum sound right there.
Yes,
I mean,
imagine. It's like
yeah.
it's this dull thud, but it works so perfectly, and it sits perfectly in the track. But he had invented this stuff with these old CBS compressors that he rewired. He used to roll in this rack, so that and hook up Pultecs to it. And what would happen is, like, when the vocal would come on, right in the center, things would move out of the way.
Like
Wow.
side chaining and stuff.
Straight
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just
straight up
the
movement.
EQ. Yeah, the EQ would just, that EQ for the vocal would just move away. The vocal would stop. It would close up again. This hole would close up,
Jesus.
and things would come on. Little things would get.
But without distracting, just more to make the track sound better. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So he'd bring in these racks. We knew how to patch it up, but we didn't know how to operate it.
Right.
None of us did.
So there was that's what you mean by the spooky part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Oh,
know
that's
what you mean.
cool.
He just didn't know. And the other thing was that when you assisted him, he didn't like any chatter in the control room whatsoever. No talking. Only to the assistant engineer. You just kept your mouth shut. So he had sign language that he taught us, and it was like kind of like watching the coach in a baseball game. You know?
Totally.
He
yeah.
would
Yeah.
he would do that.
And obviously that was because
They
of
would
the,
be really
that was because of the
sophisticated.
intense listening he was doing though. Really,
Yeah.
He just chatter would have really thrown his game off.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I mean, probably.
Yeah.
That's hilarious though. Can you remember any of the science?
I mean, I could, you know,
This was probably.
yeah, a lot of people had to learn that, but there was an actual sign for LA2A, Pultec after the LA2A.
Oh my god.
I mean,
Oh my god.
you know, and it was all
What?
Yeah.
That's
Make a run.
great
insanity.
stuff.
And make a run for third base.
He also
classic.
insisted that we studied the producers' habits so that we could stay ahead of them.
Well,
So
that's
that-
him being pretty fair to you.
Yeah, study their habits so that you could always stay ahead and, for example, know when they were hungry
Oh, sure.
and get ahead of them.
This is pretty practical advice.
Yeah, yeah. So that when the guy turned around and said, you know, it's, this specific,
Yeah.
it's 2:00, I could go for a pastrami on rye. You could
Pastrami
say,
and rye was
it's
there.
all- yeah.
Oh
It's-
my
it'll
God.
be here. It should be coming through the
It should
door.
be-
eh?
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, he insisted on that kind of stuff. You had to
Wow.
do that.
And that's why you do to this day, right?
Yeah, and when he trained us, when he finally let us go,
Starting right.
go off by ourselves, he made us do 4-track dates, demos. I did all of Billy Joel's demos for Columbia.
Interesting.
4-track, with Artie Rip in the room.
Wow.
Yeah, 4-track demos.
His original demos?
His original
that he
demos that
first
got him
did?
his deal.
Wow.
And I was, you had to do a few months of being the demo guy, 4-track, whole rhythm sections. I did all the Bells demos, 4-track.
So a lot of chaining and bouncing, or not bouncing, but just sub.
Rhythm section on 1 or 2 tracks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then leave open for vocals.
It sounds like all the things he had you do was all really practical, logical stuff that really probably helped you.
We loved it.
Wow, man, he really
you had to spend a few months in the dubbing room where you learned to edit.
Wow.
All that's good stuff,
That's like
you don't need anymore. Practical uses of nothing.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's like
I haven't had a razor blade in my hand since I last shaved.
Yeah, right. Jeez.
It's like,
And even that's been a while.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Do you miss it?
Well, I still shave my neck.
Not that. Thanks for letting me geek out and ask some
I know, it's fun.
questions. Like you could just stay on New York for,
Yeah.
We can talk about a lot of things. It's awesome.
spend an hour on Don McLean. Lord knows they did.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks for listening. Find us online at tapop.com, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Until next time,